Hi everyone, welcome. It's midterm season and we're thrilled to take a break from, a study break, some of us, and also here thrilled to welcome Gina Pell. It's all about mindset and no longer about a one-dimensional timeline that runs from birth to death. So said Gina Pell in 2016 when she was describing the perennial attitude, an attitude that brings nonlinear thinking to the idea of aging and generational change. As a tech entrepreneur who found herself frustrated by some of the marketing strategies that would pigeonhole individuals into particular demographics, boomers and millennials and Gen Xers, many of these concepts felt sort of foreign, and Gina drew on her own personal experience and maybe her liberal arts education here at Cal to question whether or not those demographic positions actually could describe the human experience or the human imagination. Indeed, perennials, like Gina Pell herself, move amongst many spheres, embracing curiosity, exploration, and reinvention. It's thrilling for me to be introducing Gina Pell herself here in this forum of A+D Mondays, who is going to speak tonight about the perennial concept and on the problems of seeing the world through generational boundaries. Gina is, as many of you know, an award-winning creative director and tech entrepreneur. With Amy Parker, she co-founded Splendora in 1999, a culturally innovative online fashion space that was acquired by Joyous in 2011. Pell served as Chief Creative Officer of Joyous until 2013. And then in 2015, she and Amy Parker again began to co-author The What List. As content chief of The What, of this fast-growing email newsletter, she features an array of eclectic tips that subscribers should know or must know, often every week, thinking about books and health, blockchain theory, style reports, and many more. Since coining that term, Gina has begun to speak and find herself featured in a variety of venues and broadcast outlets, and we're thrilled to have her today. She's going to be speaking, and then we'll hear a response from Susan Hoffman, the director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute here at UC Berkeley, which Susan started in 2007, and you could say in many ways has served as a kind of proto-perennial institute, a place that is also cultivating models and programs that refuse a certain kind of pigeonholing intergenerational sensibility. Susan comes to us with many years of experience in the arts and education, and I know that she's also one to embrace curiosity, exploration, and reinvention in learning and creation. For now, please help me welcome Gina Pell.
What a nice intro. Thanks, Shannon. The last time I was standing on a stage at Berkeley, I was graduating, and I was probably wearing this exact outfit, much to the chagrin of my daughter, who said I should wear a dress and look pretty. Well, I'm here to talk about perennials, which is a little bit surreal being here at Berkeley, because when I was here, my mom and dad, who are both immigrants, they said to me, "What are you going to major when you go to college? What are you going to major in when you go to college?" And when I was an undergraduate, and I said, "I'm going to major in English." And they said, "Why would you major in English? You speak English already. You're never going to get a job majoring in English." But I guess I did find a job, and the cool thing is that perennial is a neologism, or the coining of a new term, and so I'm here to present that new term today. So the perennial mindset, it all started with an article that I wrote in Medium, and it was a really simple 900-word essay. It's a 5-minute read, and it's still on Medium right now. I wrote it, and within the first week, I had 0 followers on Medium. In fact, I was just testing out Medium as a writing platform. And within a few weeks, it was translated into 9 languages. MSNBC called, CNN called, it was linked to 50 times. It was one of the first things I ever wrote that went viral and resonated with people. And I was kind of surprised by it because really for me, it was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to hearing a lot of trash talking about millennials, which I thought was kind of ridiculous because there's always some trash talking about the generation coming to power. There was trash talking when my generation came to power, when I was just starting out in the internet. And I just thought, if the best technology companies in the world targeted you based on what you do, why should we still think of the world in a generational divide? This was one of my favorite press hits right here. This was in the Baptist News. I mean, I really liked my press hits in CNN and MSNBC, but I thought this was kind of cool because this was about the Baptist church sending this out to their congregation, saying that we should stop targeting millennials and we should start using the term perennials because it's less divisive. So to define perennials is not a new generation. I'm not trying to create some cute little fluffy term for a new generation. Perennial is a mindset, and perennial, since I've written about it, a lot of people that it's resonated with have been over 40, and they've felt very empowered by the term. But perennials isn't just a term to describe relevant people over 40. Perennials are people of all ages. They are curious, they're lifelong learners who constantly push up against their growing edge, and they resist categorization and transcend generational stereotypes or otherwise. Perennials have what psychologist Carol Dweck from Stanford wrote in her book, Mindset, a growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset. And we'll talk about that later. But most importantly, the reason why I talk about this and talking about pushing up against your growing edge, I actually really hate public speaking. And I do it because I've been talking about perennials a lot, because every time I talk about it, I learn something new about it myself. And people always come up to me afterwards, and several people have had tears in their eyes and said, I finally feel understood. I don't feel my age, young people and older people. I don't feel what people tell me about my age and the limitations of my age. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And even though I'm sitting here at Berkeley, and Berkeley's had a lot of amazing breakthroughs here, like, actually, did you know that Rube Goldberg went here? I had no idea. Well, Shannon knows. Also, I think the wetsuit was invented here, and the CRISPR was invented here. And so this might not be the CRISPR 3, but it's my own term, and I'm here to see it through. So here's just a few adjectives to describe the perennial profile, and you can look at these adjectives, and if you're here on a Monday night to listen to a new term being coined, chances are you're a perennial already. But perennials are curious, they're passionate, they're flexible, they're daring, they're collaborative, they're resilient, they're generous, they're proactive, they're humble, and they're open. When I showed this list to a friend of mine, he said, what, so everybody's a perennial then? And no, of course, everybody is not a perennial. I think we can think of a few people in this world who are divisive name callers, who think they know it all. They don't have a growth mindset. They have a fixed mindset. And the perennial profile is for people who, maybe you can be born a perennial, a natural perennial, but perennial is a mindset that you can choose. So why did I write this perennial piece on Medium? I wrote it because, as Shannon was saying, I spent a career online on the web and digital media 20 years ago, and we were creating something new, and we would go to New York, and the marketers in New York would basically buy, after a while, they would buy anything that we were selling because they were feeling that they were missing out here on the West Coast of what was happening on the internet. And so the What being my third company, when my partner and I went back to New York to start looking for advertising and sponsorship, we thought that we were just going to just turn on a spigot of money and watch the dollars roll in. But what we were told by the VPs of marketing was that unless we were focused exclusively on millennials, that they had no interest in what we were doing. So back then, and this was, these were headlines from about 2 years ago, you could see that the whole world was just obsessed with millennials. Every news piece that you met was about millennials, and I I wrote Meet the Perennials and came up with this term Perennials because I was sick of hearing millennials being vilified. And I was also thinking that a lot of these marketers were just, missing the point. Because, and to give you an idea of what the generations look like, you can see here that there's the builders, they call them the builders, there's all these names for these generations. The baby boomers are actually the only defined generation that we really have, clearly defined generation that we have. And baby boomers are 52 to 70 right now. Generation X, that would be the generation I'm supposed to be in, is 37 to 51. Generation Y, which is the millennial generation, 22 to 36. Gen Z, so on and so on. But when I saw the world through this generational lens, I was looking more towards the overlap in behavior and who wants to be stereotyped by what your generation does? I mean, my generation, Generation X, 37 through 51, we were all called slackers, and I think we did pretty well for ourselves during the beginning of the internet. But like I said, I wrote this article because the best technology and the best technology companies in the world were targeting based on an algorithm of behavior and not by your age. And so I thought it was time that we started looking at ourselves and each other a little differently. But I understand this obsession with age, and I understand the obsession with millennials because this is what the world looked like in 2015, and the millennials overtook the baby boomers as the largest living generation in the United States. And so you can see what that looks like at a glance. But this kind of thinking, having marketers constantly retuning their messaging to cater to the generation that's coming to power, it just seems like such an insecure stance in terms of how to build your messaging. And just every month there'd be a new flavor of the month, and now it's Gen Z. Millennials are out now. This is the new, right here, this is the new headline that you're seeing now, and it's all about Gen Z. So now even millennials are passed by. And why do I care about this? Why did I want to write about this? Because I believe, and there's a lot of there are a lot of books written on this topic, books that I wasn't able to read before this presentation. But how we identify ourselves and what we call ourselves and how we are categorized really makes a difference in our self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves. And in some ways, I understand this obsession with age. In fact, here's a little slide. This is Cara Delevingne. She's a 25-year-old supermodel, and she was announced as the new anti-aging face of Dior in November of last year, which is, I mean, these are the kinds of images that we're confronted with all the time. And if this is the face of anti-aging, what is this doing to our psyche and to our self-esteem? But I haven't always had such a perennial mindset. I used to be totally obsessed with age too. And it happened right around the time of one of my dreaded milestone birthdays. It was I'm really bad at math, so I can't even tell you the year, but I was 15 turning 16, and there was this person called Madonna around the time when I was turning 16. And it's so ridiculous, but Madonna was 24 when I was turning 16, and I actually compared myself to her. I call it the Madonna complex because I was 16 and I thought I only have a few years to do something really great. I don't know what it is, and if I don't, then I'm just going to be washed up. And so here I was at 16, washed up, dressed in my Madonna gear. And that's because, when I was growing up, and still now, I know that is a ridiculous picture. When I was growing up, and I think still very much now, we have this prescribed timeline that we march to, and that's, you're born, you're this little girl, you go to school. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe you're disco dancing, and then you get pregnant. And you have your kids, and then it looks like you're going back to work, and then you're, I don't know, wearing a cap and clunky shoes. Maybe that's like where maybe that's the age I'm at right now. And then you're an old lady and you die. And so this is the prescribed flat linear timeline that we're told about, and we're told, this is what you have coming up for you. And you have to achieve all of these things, like, okay, so you're a little girl now? All right, little girl. Actually, my daughter, she's a little girl. She's in the audience right now. She's 9. It's as if I give her a roadmap, a very linear roadmap, and said, you just have to follow this prescribed timeline and hit all these milestones by the time you're a certain age. But the reality is, I felt washed up at 16, because I was so desperately trying to become something by 24. And actually, when I did turn 24, I did follow one of my dreams, and I ended up at a studio in Hollywood where I was working in production. I actually worked at this very cool studio where the Altman film, The Player, was filmed. But instead of working behind the camera where I really wanted to work, I found myself washed up working at a desk, and I was 24 years old. And I'm making this point, I'm telling this weird anecdote because I'm trying to tell you that this isn't just about feeling relevant over 40. It's the perennial mindset is about feeling relevant at every age and every stage whenever you feel stuck. And I felt stuck many times in my life, and I feel that a lot of people feel stuck at many times in their lives. And when I was 24, I was working at the studio, and I was a paper pusher sitting behind a desk. And the amazing thing is that Madonna actually did come into my studio to film a movie, and I was too depressed because I just didn't want to see her, because I felt like, well, who am I? And that's the thing. I think that with Carol Dweck's book Mindset, which is a really excellent book, and I have it recommended on a slide that's coming up, where she talks about what a growth mindset means, where a growth mindset is based on learning and effort. It's not based on this intrinsic magic that you were born with, that only you possess, but something that you keep working on. When I was feeling washed up at 24, I realized that I just had accepted that my fate, that strange graphic of the little girl going into the old woman. And I felt like, well, I chose my path. I ended up here where I wanted to. I'm not successful, and I just have to, maybe an office job is just great. Like, that's good enough. Here I am. And that's what I call parking in life. And I feel that, especially as I've gotten older and my friends have aged with me, I find that some friends, in fact, all the friends here today, thank you, all my perennial friends here today, they keep going and they keep pushing and they keep learning and they keep exploring. But there are plenty of people I know who just prefer to park in life and you know what, and that's good too. There's no judgment about that, because sometimes life can get very scary for one reason or another, and they get to a place in life and they go, okay, you know what, I got this. I don't want to push myself out of my comfort zone or push against my growing edge. It's just too hard. Why should I do that? I worked this hard. I'm just gonna chillax. But if I had stayed there at Hollywood Center Studios processing contracts, who knows where I would have been. But all I know is that for the year that I was there pushing papers, I was pretty depressed. And it wasn't until this guy from down the hall, in fact, it was the day that Madonna was visiting, that he showed me a page that looked something like this. And the web didn't really exist back then. There wasn't an internet browser at the time. So he showed me something that looked like this, and he goes, check this out, and I'm looking at this. I mean, we work in the film industry where there's stuff moving around in color, and he goes, look at this word that's underlined. Click on it. Okay. So I double-clicked on it, and it went to a whole nother page. And I kept double-clicking on the underlined words, and it kept going to different pages. I chose where I wanted to go and what I wanted to know. And that sounds so obvious right now, that we have hypertext and that we're so much more advanced than we were 25 years ago, 30 years ago. But to me, that was the breaking of linearity that I had known, the beginning, the middle, and the end, that I could just choose where I wanted to go. It was so profound, and it actually really did. I think it really just broke that desperate kind of thinking that where I'm just going to end up where I end up, I guess, And I said, where's this happening? And he said, it's happening in San Francisco. And that's where I'm from. That's where I was born. And so I followed that link all the way back to San Francisco, and I just threw myself into the internet industry. It was called multimedia back then. And, and ever since then, I've been in that industry. And Splendora was a company that I created in 1999. That was an extension of things that I knew. It was all over the map. Back then, it was a lot more frivolous. It was the Sex and the City years, and it was all about shoes and cocktails. But so some of my Splendora girls are here tonight, right here. Woo woo! We all worked together, having no idea what we were doing, actually. And it was one of the most exhilarating, thrilling times of my life when I didn't know what I was going to do, when I was scared out of my mind, really pushing myself up against my growing edge. And I felt supported because all of the people in my industry, this was a brand new industry, they didn't know what they were doing either. And so it was a much different time back then than it is now. With the bro culture and the $1 billion that can be had. This was such an exciting time in my life, and eventually we were able to sell that company. And and that looks really great, doesn't it? Wow, she must be a really successful entrepreneur. But back when we sold the company out of necessity because it was right after 2008, another desperate financial crisis. And everything was crashing all around us. And luckily, we got really clear. We had to let go of our fear, and we were able to find the right acquirer and sell our company. And so when I'm talking about perenniality, it's not just this happy-go-lucky, optimistic mindset, but it's a mindset of really hard work and effort. And knowing that when everything is fallow or burned to the ground, that things can and will come back with a lot of effort. In fact, now this is the what list, which my partner and I founded in 2015. We started that company because we felt that there was a lack of content for a perennial mindset. We started the company before I even came up with the term. And this is what's happening. This is a little glimpse into what's happening in our industry right now. How to survive the media apocalypse. And so here we are back again. That perenniality is, it's not a flat line from birth to death or from failure to success, but it is a cycle. And while this looks really scary, I am just actually trying to live in a happy state of denial and work hard to make things come back again. And it's not just my industry and the media, but all industries are changing. And here's another headline from just recently, how robots could replace nearly a third of the US workforce by 2030. And so with longer lifespans, we're gonna have to go through a lot of pivots and reskilling in our lifetime. And I really believe that the perennial mindset is something that can help us get through these times, that it's not just a term to call yourself. I mean, I think it's a better term than relating to the generational stereotype that's put upon us that we don't even choose, but to choose a very positive term to anchor by and to push up against your growing edge and get out of your comfort zone. Like I said, it's a cycle and not a flat timeline. I also found the web is just full of amazing images. I also found this image. This is from a flat Earth website. You can't imagine the video that came with it. And so some of you in the audience this might resonate with you a lot, and you're sitting there in your seat saying, yeah, I've always been a perennial. I'm absolutely a perennial. But for those of you who have doubts and think, well, easier said than done, I don't know if I'm a perennial, think there's been this happening and that happening, I get it. And there are ways to activate a sluggish perennial mindset. And so what I usually recommend is first I'm going to show you this quote that I love by Albert Einstein. And it's the difference between a fixed mindset, thinking that you're born with special talents and you're destined for greater things, and a growth mindset, where if you put a lot of effort towards something that you really are curious about or want to happen, that you can make things happen for yourself. And if Albert Einstein could say, I have no special talents, I am only passionately curious, this is a quote that is so inspirational to me. And especially being back here at Berkeley with my own neologism, that, you know, to activate your perennial mindset, it all starts with curiosity, and it starts with learning, and it ends with learning, with never-ending learning. And for those of you who need a little jump start on your learning, I've just quickly written down a few learning platforms. EDX is where you can take classes at Berkeley. Linda is a more professional platform, and I'm not going to go through each one of these. If you want lists of these, you can take a photo, or you can just contact me directly afterwards, and I'll send you this list. But these are also some books. There are plenty of books out there, but books to jumpstart your thinking. If you're curious about the perennial mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck, she's a psychologist from Stanford. Mindset is one of the smartest books. I had not even read that book before I came up with the term perennial, and a lot of her thinking, we are so aligned in the way that we think. And The Intelligent Inbox, if you're not a book reader and you're and you like to read emails, I wrote Next Draft because that's my husband's newsletter, and he's sitting right over there. He spoke here last year. Not to be competitive or anything, but and so here's a few newsletters and one podcast that I really love, which is called The Hidden Brain on NPR. And to end, I don't know who if anybody watched the Academy Awards last night, since it was the lowest watched Academy Awards of all time, I think. But there was a quote by Guillermo del Toro, and he said, I am an immigrant. The best thing our industry does is to help erase the lines in the sand when the world tries to make them deeper. And this is a metaphor for how I feel about perennials and erasing those generational divides that keep us from really seeing each other and seeing ourselves and our connection to the world. So the takeaway, it's funny, this next slide, I gave a talk at a conference that was mostly beauty professionals and salon owners. So I had this slide, and I was going to take it out for my Berkeley talk, but actually, I think I'm going to leave it in, because this is from not Steel Magnolias, right? This is from the movie Steel Magnolias, which if you saw it, it was a movie on the beauty of intergenerational relationships between women and how they help each other, women of all ages, and the way that they help each other. And if there's one thing I really want you to take away from my perennial talk, it's the ability to really see yourself and what you are capable of, and to not see yourself as the wrinkles in the mirror or the child's face in the mirror. I mean, think about what that amazing activist Emma Gonzalez was able to do, in Florida a couple of weeks ago. And she's 18, and she could have just said, well, I'm a high school student, what can I do? No one's going to listen to me. And she's making a huge difference in our world. That if there's one thing I hope everybody can take away, is to look past faces, look past the wrinkles, look past young faces, and see if there's somebody to connect there with. There is someone to connect there with. And you'll be surprised in what you find in other people and in yourself. Thank you.
That's quite inspiring. You know, I knew what you were going to talk about. I was ready for it, but I got more than I was expecting.
Wow.
You know, because I think I was thinking, okay, you're going to talk about how the generations are passé, but I didn't realize you were shifting into the high gear of mindset and how important that is. Gina and I just learned that our lives could have crossed a couple of times. First, I think in the film industry, you were there, and I was at the American Film Institute trained to be a film director, made a film about a samurai and a witch, based on a play by David Henry Wong, where the witch is presumed to go in and kill samurai. And so it was a sort of parable about the war, because it was at that point Bush had said he wanted to bomb Afghanistan back to the Stone Age. So I made the choice. I was 47, and my cohorts were in their 20s. And I decided that the samurai and the witch were going to be 40, if not 50, and that it was going to be told erotically. They thought I was crazy. And I managed to pull it off. The reviews were great. And in fact, Kurosawa's biographer said, "Whoa, you're the feminist Kurosawa of our generation." Any rate, I just realized that there was, you get cast in a certain way. You hear that it's too soon or too late. Whoa, that's great to take that away.
Yeah, I always felt that when I was younger. At one point, I was always the youngest person in the room, and I always wanted to look older. In fact, now I wear glasses, and you saw me squinting there because my glasses are in my pocket and I didn't want to fumble for them. But when I was younger and I didn't wear glasses, I used to wear fake glasses to look older. And so my older sister's there, like, yes, she did. And I felt like I never really wanted to be my age. And I find that I don't really know a lot of people who are their age. My father-in-law is 94 years old, and my mother-in-law is 89 years old. And they're some of the smartest, funniest, most interesting people that I know. And they would have been here tonight, but they couldn't make it. And so I think most of the people that I love and my friends that are here tonight, I have this funny saying that when I meet somebody brand new, and if I really love them, I always think, it seems like we could have gone to high school together. I think because when I was in high school, that was the last time I felt like the world was brand new and very vibrant, and that certain people can bring that feeling out in me again, and certain things can bring that feeling out in me again. And so to find those people and those things, those projects that can make you feel that way again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like being in love is the fountain of youth, even though we don't talk about youth.
Yeah. Or it's finding the flow, when all the sort of factors kind of line up to make you, or it's like the Japanese term, excuse me, yugen, when your intention and your execution meets with an audience and it's perfect.
I like that.
Yeah, a snowflake glistening on a field. I think this has such great potential. I think it's not surprising that Carol Dweck at Stanford also works with the Longevity Center, which is based at Stanford. And they have been talking, as we have been here at UC Berkeley, around the fact that what we get with longevity, right now we get that bonus 30, 35 years at the end. But now that we know the lifespan can be longer, it means it frees everybody up to sort of use time very differently. And so I think this perennial is really timed well, for people to be ready to go in and out of. One of the thoughts had been with the longevity was that, sometimes, the 20, 30-year-olds, they need to not work so hard. They're making their families. Why not have them work part-time rather than feeling like this is the only time they can make their career happen? And so I think we need more conversations, like the perennial conversation, to say we gotta move in and out of our professional lives and our personal lives in ways that's real. Because what's more important than family and being a good person?
Well, one thing, speaking about pushing up against my growing edge, I've been approached by a few people to write a book, and I read Carol's book, and she spent 20 years of research, maybe more, looking at the difference between a growth and fixed mindset and how it really affects people's performance. And I really felt that Perennials, I'm not being humble about this. I really felt that Perennials was just too lightweight of a term to really write 368 pages about. But I feel that the more I speak about it and the more issues that come up, like the fact that I just heard, I'm on a panel next week or in 2 weeks at South by Southwest called The Age of Ageless. And I'm speaking with somebody from the AARP. That's interesting. But what she said to me was really interesting, which she has a statistic that 50, something like the 10 people, kids 10 and under right now, 50% of them are going to live to the age of 100. And when you, and when you think about that, and you think about how many different ages are going to be in the workforce, so if you think about the fact that we're going to be working, we're going to have to work longer. If we're going to live longer, we're going to have to work longer. So there's no more retirement age at 65. I'm sorry to tell everybody. And you have all of these generations in the workplace. Then to say, oh, that old fart is just a baby boomer, and it's going to be, everybody's going to be reskilling.
Or we might have to work a little less hard.
Well,
Since Americans work so hard, all the time. It would be nice for there to be something that was had a little bit more give to it than our professional lives and responsibilities. I run this Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at UC Berkeley. We've got about 2,600 members who come into the classroom to learn. Many of them are taking anywhere from 2 to 8 courses a term, which means they're in the classroom anywhere from 4 to 16 hours a week. And it's very inspiring, because they get into the classroom and it's like its own theater. There's great faculty, new ideas. They're pushing along with the new ideas, trying to adjust to, new insights, and loving it. And the energy that gets put out, we have Berkeley faculty come back and say, whoa, this is the best teaching experience I've ever had. And so, I just think about all those opportunities we miss by not making, in the instance of the university, not making the university be more open to people over their lifetime. So I guess part of the challenge is, how do we get institutions to have a perennial mindset, to know that people are going to need, to get support and have a platform for exploring, and, so sign me up. And let's see what we can do with, with the institutions that I think also hold the generations in. So, there's so much more to plumb. Let me look at my notes, because I think that one of the things I do at Ollie at Berkeley is I have what I call my 4th age salon. And I didn't want to call it anything else but a salon, because I wanted it to be my 80-year-old, my 90-year-old members come in and just, talk with me about what was on their minds. And for me to then bring them, some of the great minds on campus that were about the topics they were interested in. So, all right, what do we think is on the minds of 80 and 90-year-olds? People would think, oh, the past. No. They all wanted to know about the future. We brought Ken Goldberg down to talk about algorithms. We brought, Greg Niemeyer to talk about how video games work on your brain. It was just the curiosity of those that were 80 and 90. It's just very inspiring to me. And the reason why I started it is that nobody had ever asked someone in their 80s and 90s, what is it that you want to learn? Can you imagine what gets lost by not asking the question to everybody?
Well, I think with the way how I would like to evangelize Perennials is for everybody to ask what they'd like to learn at all ages. Because I think at 80 and 90, maybe 80 and 90-year-olds it sounds like you have a lot in your program that are constantly learning, but I think that there's a lot of people my age and even younger and I know people who are 30 who think, thank God school's over. Like school's the enemy, right?
Yeah.
All right, I did all my learning and now I can just coast. But I think it's the learning mindset, and that's what Carol also talks about in her book, is to create a life of lifelong learning.
Right. You know, the other thing I like about Carol Dweck is that she really tries to get us off that track of being the judger. You know, continue to learn. You know, why does somebody do something? If it pisses you off, ask questions rather than make a judgment about them. And I think that's also part of the perennial. You know, learning from people rather than placing them somewhere, you know, as on the wrong side. So, yeah. What about, you know, the thing I always worry about is the generational divides. And boy, having a perennial mindset really helps, because I have heard from, you know, people that are Generation X saying to boomers, will you guys ever leave your job so you can make opportunities for us? Have you heard that?
No.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. All right. I think that there's...
Then
has
I'm
anybody
an
else heard
entrepreneur.
that?
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I don't work in a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, so I think that, so obviously I think the generational divides create some tension. That's not always very good. Ken Goldberg. Hey,
Ken, hello.
hi. Yeah, we will. Yes. Should we give him the first question?
Yeah, you know what? You get the
You have the
first
first
question just
question.
for that. Yeah, this is a lot of pressure.
Sorry, I was just thinking about this because, you know, I think it's progress in medicine, and that people are living longer. We're also eating better. We're taking better care of ourselves. So there's this idea that also because of the shifts in economics, many people need to work longer. And certainly at the university, we're seeing this, that a lot of faculty are staying on, and there's no mandatory retirement, so they're happily working, and there is this question because they're sitting on a faculty slot, right? And yeah, so I do think there is some interesting pressure. I'm curious more what you think about this, and also it reminds me because Albert Brooks has a book about this called 2050, and it's all about essentially the war between the generations, because everyone under 30 or something becomes extremely angry at everyone over 30 for both letting them down in terms of the planet, but also just because they're sucking up all these resources and they feel like there's not enough to go around. So I'm curious how you think about that, because I do think there is something, maybe it is time, like in other cultures where people do graciously retire, and maybe we should think about encouraging that.
Yeah, passing the torch. Well, I'm not an expert on what's going to happen with the workforce. I mean, I think it's all going to change. I think all industries, education is going to change, right? So tenured professorship might be the least of your problems in 10 years, you know? But I just think in terms of generations dealing with each other, even for, you know, now that I've been talking about perennials for so long, I truly do not see the world in these generational lumps. And when I wrote the piece, Meet the Perennials, as a response to all of the millennial bashing, it's because, and I've millennials sitting right there who we used to work together, the millennials that I had never experienced millennial behavior like the behavior they were talking about. And I found that a lot of my friends that would just sit around going, oh, they're so entitled. They were saying the exact same words over and over, which is so dangerous when you start stereotyping and you start hearing the same words come up over and over again. You know, and then not to mention the self-fulfilling prophecy that you have with generations just hearing, oh, well, my generations, we're just a bunch of entitled losers. You know, I really think that if we're all going to be on this planet a lot longer together, working together, living together, maybe looking like each other, right? Because it used to be really easy to tell the difference between a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old and a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old. Now I mean, I just met someone who was 50-something, and I was absolutely shocked. I thought she was in her late 20s, seriously. You know, and I think that not to look at what we saw at the Academy Awards last night, some of those faces, but I mean, if you look at how plastic surgery is going to improve, if we all look alike, and we're all drawing from the same social feed. So a lot of my argument about how it's about mindset, and that I don't even really think about age. I just think, like, do we think alike, or do we see eye to eye? When I look at someone like Dave's mom, who's on Facebook, who's 89, she's connected to all of her grandkids and her kids, who are ranging in age from 16 to 60, right? And so imagine, like, when we're clicking like on her stuff and she's clicking like on our stuff, what's coming up in her feed? Hopefully she's not clicking like on too much of our stuff, Dave. But you know, so if we're all drawing from the same, I think that the division between ages used to be a lot more apparent. People seemed a lot older than they are now, because we were dealing from such different indices. You know, it's like we weren't all looking. We were maybe all looking at the same TV show, but we weren't all looking at the same stuff. And even if you kind of look around this room, I mean, look at the way I'm dressed. I'm dressed like I was dressed in 1985, you know? I mean, I think people are beginning to dress the same, use the same lingo, you know what I mean?
The same here.
Normcore. But yeah, so going, your question about, I didn't answer your question, I was trying to actually purposely avoid it.
It's a tough one.
But it is going to be tough, very tough.
You know what I think? Part of it, because I represent the older learner, right? People over 50. I realize that there is a tremendous wisdom factor. And if, in fact, there was places in the culture, places in the university, places in the city where that wisdom factor could be utilized, I don't think you'd have those tenured faculty holding on to their positions. You know, partly because it really is still, people are still getting good stuff from being able to do their trade. To share information and you know, have that matter. And so since we have so much stuff that you know that people are put into the generations and into the professions, it's harder because there's not the opportunities to share what they do know. I know with Ollie, we've got 300, 400 volunteers. And one of my tasks that I don't think I've adequately addressed is how to use all that talent. You know, it's just, it always amazes me. The one thing that always comes up is the digital divide and the sense of time. I mean, when I heard you were concerned at 24 that your life was over, I think that was it's very indicative of how fast things are changing and how much everybody, you know, is expecting to do more and more and more. And, you know, I think maybe it is time for some slow thinking and some other things that, I mean, I think of your Shabbat, how wonderful to imagine that you can unplug and not have to be engaged all the time. I think that's, for me, that's what I always see, is the pressure that everybody who's in that, you know, remember the lineage of the people walking to death, I guess. You know, it's like, you know, it could be a lot more joyful, you know, at every step of the way. But it's not. Cheryl.
I'll repeat that. If there's a group of people that get it and are perennials, and you know there's many and they're there, and there's a group of people that sort of get it but can't figure out how to respond or how to reframe themselves or reinvent themselves, and then a group of people that don't get it, which of those two last groups are you more concerned about? Which of those two last groups do you want to try to...
The middle one. The middle one.
Okay,
The ones who are trying to figure out how to activate it.
And could you talk about that a little bit and how to, because I don't think, I mean, I feel I'm a perennial and I've always been a perennial.
Yeah.
So you're talking to the choir, but how do you go to the other group?
Well, I think as a perennial, I'm sure you have friends who would say to you, I don't know how you do what you do. I could never, a lot of the sentences start with, I could never, ... fill in the blank, right? And I think those are the people to reach, because they are actually, it's kind of a cry for help. It's saying, I admire you, I admire what you're doing, I just could never do it myself. Whereas I think that there are some people who just are not interested and will never be perennial. They are people who are just very fixed in their mindset, who think, I've come this far, I don't want to work any harder. This is the way life is. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so for those people, I think it's a little bit harder to get to those people. But the people I'm interested in is the middle category of people who are wondering if they could be perennial. And the way that I try to get to those people, I don't mean to embarrass you, Rosa. My sister Rose is here, but she was one of those people who would say, I love what you're doing. That's so awesome that you do that, but I couldn't do that. And the way I try to encourage it is through learning, is through asking yourself this one simple question: what am I curious about? And then following that curiosity down the rabbit hole. Because curiosity isn't enough. It's about productive curiosity. And everybody is curious about something. Even if it's like, what would I look like with really short hair? I actually was curious about that for myself. I wanted to shave the back. I saw Frances McDormand's haircut, and I thought maybe I'd look good in a haircut like that. But I mean, everybody has a curiosity, and to just, if you could start with a curiosity, it's not as scary, and to go baby steps.
Thank you very much. I'd like to get your thoughts and insights about how these intergenerations are approaching long-term care, events that are out there and we're not sure about them, their uncertainties. How are we able to engage across these different generations? And I guess it goes back to another question. Why are professors not leaving their roles? Is it based on that uncertainty?
I think it's a great question for you.
Thank you. Were you casting me there? Joking. All right. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
Oh, good.
Great.
So part of your point around long-term care is knowing that since we will be living for so much longer, that all of us at some point in our lives will need to have a family member or a caretaker, help us navigate. And I think that, in the last White House Conference on Aging in 2015, I think it was, there was one of the major points in it was looking at caretakers and understanding that there has been a big shift, that it used to be all institutionalized or hidden. And they kind of put the light on it and showed, that for all of us, at some point, we're going to be taking care of someone, and someone's going to be taking care of us. And I think we're, I buy that very expensive long-term care insurance, and when my sons come home at the holidays and say, Mom, we're going to return and take care of you, I say, I've got long-term care insurance. I don't need taken care of yet. I think there is a mindset about long-term care that we really do have to get out there. And I think it's how, for me, I have always linked the disability movement and, the Gray Panthers, when Maggie Kuhn started that, was at the same time that the Ed Roberts started the disability movement here at Berkeley. I think it's just acknowledging what is real about being human, and trying to come up with the compassionate factor that I think we do seem to be missing in our culture. That's not a way of immediately addressing long-term care issues. The other question that you had, remind me, it was? Yeah. Mm. Do you want to, so again, it's the question to Gina about the multi-generational look.
Yeah, that's a complex one, and I think that, I mean, the only way I could hope to answer that is just through very clear communication between the generations, and that's going to take some time, but it's, like I said at the end of my presentation, it starts with actually really seeing each other, and to just obliterate this generational thinking, and to really just see each other as human people, you know. And so how is that going to happen? I think continuing to have dialogue like this and to talk to the people in your life about it and people around you, and that the more we can continue this dialogue with each other, the more we'll begin to see each other. So, I mean, it's really surprised me, actually. It really has surprised me how much play this Perennials word has gotten over the last year. I couldn't believe that it's been written about in India, Australia, Guatemala, Brazil, Spain, France, Germany. One of the very first calls I got was from Aftenpost in Norway. It's the equivalent of the Norwegian New York Times, and they actually bought the article. I didn't quite tell them that nobody pays money for articles anymore, so I gladly took their money. You saw that my industry's in the toilet right now, but. I was really surprised that this word resonated so much because, yeah, I'm a marketer, but also I would like to say a little bit of an anthropologist from Berkeley too. I've always been interested in human behavior. I've always been interested in collaboration and in obliterating those categories that divide us. And I look at Shannon Jackson up there, and what we worked on in the last 2 years with Berkeley Arts and Design, which is trying to weave a through line of arts through all of those siloed departments here. Engineering wouldn't speak to so-and-so, and then English wouldn't speak, and so I think it's because I'm a middle child. I'm the middle child between like two older and two younger. So I was like, can't we just all get along, And so that's always been kind of a mission in my life, in my own family, and with the work that I have been doing. And it seems like I'm a very reluctant spokesperson for Perennials because somebody told me, well, if you wrote a book, then you'd be speaking about this everywhere. And I go, forget it. I mean, this is, my friends are here in the front row, and this is about as much as I can do right now. But, like I said, I guess I have to keep pushing myself up against my own growing. Oh boy, I don't even, wow, questions.
So just to follow on this intergenerational question that you brought up, I'm a lifelong learner and proud of it. But what I've noticed as I've aged is that, and I think a lot of people my age group or older will notice, is that as you become older, you start to become invisible. And it's not, I haven't quite figured out why that is, but people younger than me, who might be perennials or maybe they're not, but they're not interested in talking with people in my age group and older.
Then they're not perennial.
Another generation. Lily Talman's response to that invisibility? Shoplift.
That's a good one. I really hear what you're saying. I don't know if you were like this as a child, but I know that when I was a child, I was always drawn to just people that radiated a cool vibe. I grew up here in California, so I can say things like that. And a lot of people that I gravitated towards were people my parents' age and older. And so I wonder, I absolutely, I hear what you're saying, and I feel that we are a youth culture that has no value on people over 40, really, right? And you become more invisible as you age. And that it's our job as perennials I assume you're over 30, to try to engage with younger people and for you to put it out there, because you might find that who knows the reason, right? They just might be a little shy so it's about finding what your overlap is and finding what your interests are. And I find that if you talk to somebody for longer than 5 minutes, you can always find something that you're both mutually interested in. I mean, look at that New York Times article. I don't know if you've all read it, but it was something like, I can't even remember, like the 30 questions to ask to fall in love. Have you read that? Was it like the 31 questions that lead to love? And it was this article that was written in the New York Times a couple years ago, and it was, if you ask these 31 questions and stare this other person in the face, you will fall in love. And that just shows, no, seriously. And there's all this science behind it. And that just shows that if we can really see each other and speak to each other, we can find so much value in each other. And so if they're overlooking you, you should approach them. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Gina.
Oh,
Hi.
sorry, Josh.
Sorry.
Okay. All right.
So, looking back to the graphic that you showed us of a little girl going through life, how would you redraw it?
I don't even think I'd draw a graph, because for me it's not about silhouettes of bodies and watching, as you get hunched over. It's not about your physicality, it's about what you think. And I think I'd redraw it. I'm so mad that I didn't put this in my slide, but I actually had an amazing image of a brain that it wasn't quite psychedelic, but it was this really cool artist rendering of a brain that looked like a very active, amazing brain, and it was very abstract. So I would probably draw it as a brain, some kind of an abstract brain, with a big P in the middle. Josh.
So it feels like we're talking about a lot right now is American culture.
Yeah.
And so my question is, are there other cultures around the world that, if we want to kind of move toward a more perennial orientation, that we could look to for guidance?
That is such an excellent question, not just because you're my friend, but because, in fact, one of the movies that really sparked my thinking was the movie called The Great Beauty, La Gran Bellezza. It's the most beautiful film by Paolo Sorrentino. And the movie starts off with this very chic Italian man, and he's turning 65, and it's his retirement party, and it is a wild party on a rooftop with young people, older people, strippers. It is like the wildest scene. And one of my best friends moved to Paris when we were 18, and when she moved there, I spent a lot of time with her there over the years, and I noticed that whenever I would go visit her, there would be every age of person in the room, and that was normal. So our social life was, there would be an 80-year-old guy, there'd be some very dapperly dressed 80-year-old man, and he'd be making the martinis, and then there'd be some teen trying to sneak the martinis, but we would all be hanging out and multi-generational parties, and it wasn't just your own family members. It was such a natural thing in France and in Italy, and I felt that a lot more in Europe. And here, it's like, I haven't been to Brazil, but I think that I would, and to say this anecdotally, the places where I've traveled in Europe, Spain, most of the European countries, I think their scenes are a lot more age diverse than ours. I've walked into a bar and felt like, whoa, I'm in the wrong place. It's like everybody's 21 years old, and so I feel that, if we could move more towards a culture where we're all, not only are we all communicating with each other and seeing each other, but we're all hanging out together. Personally, that's the best that is the most rich interaction you can get, and I wrote about this in an article in New York Mag, which was about why you should have intergenerational friendships. I was interviewed in an article called "When Your Best Friend Is Younger Than Your Daughter," and I was quoted as saying, "I can't believe I'm quoting myself at Berkeley. This is awesome." And I was quoted as saying that when we hang around with people of all ages, it reminds us of who we were, who we are, and who we are to become. And so, personally, like when you were talking about the 80, hanging out with the 80 and 90-year-olds, I want to be there. Yeah. I mean, and you know what I think having longer lifespans and perennial thinking, we come from this top-down thinking of wisdom where it's like, I am the older person and I will now impart upon you, a young child, And I think that that's, especially about intergenerational conflict in the workplace. I've talked about this a few times. You have a lot of friction between the younger people who are trying to rise through the ranks, and I had a woman. She broke down in tears at a panel where I was because she was 30, and she was saying that she has this new job where she's been promoted, but she's been promoted above, and now she's the boss of the woman who hired her, who had been her boss for a while. And there was a lot of tension, and there was a lot of animosity, and there seemed to be a lot of proprietary stuff going on her side. And one of the women on my panel really wisely suggested, instead of just taking this, it's kind of understandable. I mean, it kind of sucks that this poor woman was not prepared for the fact that she was going to be usurped by her. I mean, aren't all these Hollywood movies made about this? Like the ingenue comes in, and pretty much the old actress is, But I mean, the workplace, management can do a better job at preparing for that situation. But also the person, the ingenue who finds themselves in that situation, can still treat the person who is usurped with respect and continue to ask. And to show, to train her what she knows and to ask what she knows and to have a more free-flow, collaborative working relationship. And so I don't think it has to be that way. Yes?
As an artist, my first response, especially to the gentleman in the back, is also through arts, dance, theater, music, about the building and expanding on relationships between different generations, especially possibly people not speaking to older generations and feeling invisible. And many of you probably already know about this movie that was nominated for a documentary Oscar last night, JR and Agnes Varda.
I love that film. I forgot to bring it up.
Faces,
Places. Everybody watch that. That is the most beautiful collaboration.
And that's just about that kind of friendship, and with Agnes Varda and with a 35-year-old and a soon-to-be 90-year-old woman. So I think through the arts, that's key. And just watching that movie is just gorgeous.
Thank you. I just watched that with my children. And JR, for those of you who aren't familiar with his work, you might remember that beautiful photograph of the little baby girl on the wall when it was on the wall, Mexican. She's hanging over it, and there's soldiers in front of it. That's JR. And then Agnes Varda, it was a new wave French filmmaker. And they're 50 years apart. She's 88, he's 33. And they go across the countryside doing this incredible collaboration, this work together. And I talked about some of those collaborations, like with Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. People thought, what the heck is Lady Gaga at the height of her career doing with this old codger? And that just showed that he saw the beauty in her, and she saw the beauty in him, as two artists really truly seeing each other. And she's not seeing some old has-been. His voice sounds amazing. And the fact that she did that gives me so much respect for her as an artist, because I can see that she has the gift of sight as well as the gift of a beautiful voice. So I think the more collaborations we can see like that, the world's going to be a better place for it.
This reminds me of a story. One of the symposium that we put on, brought women together to talk about online dating. And the women that were 60 saying, it's so hard, you know, once you say you're 60, you get no action at all. And the 93-year-old said, it's all in the words you use. And they said, all in what words? And she said, I use 3 words. And I got dozens of response. And they said, well, what were the 3 words? And she said, and her 3 words were, Harold, call Maud.
Oh.
Isn't that brilliant? You know, I think it's great not to take it all too seriously. Yeah.
Oh, a question from my own sister. Hello, Rosa.
This is more like a comment more than a question. I was just thinking that your message is so important, especially for, the second group that you talked about, the perennials in training, that you don't really, you want to get there, but you don't know how to get there. So I was thinking that you should still write a book, and it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be 300 pages, but it could be like something on Amazon CreateSpace. You don't have to go out there and market it. I'm serious, really. It could be just like a collection of maybe the articles that you've written, or just like a handbook or something, but just to put it out there, because this is the first time I've heard you speak about it, and I think that you're so inspirational and you're phenomenal that sometimes, well, I recorded you so that I could go back and look at it, but, sometimes you want to go back and think, well, gosh, I still need something to get me going, that even if there was a little ebook on CreateSpace, Amazon, you should do it. I think you should do it. Who thinks you should do that?
Oh, stop it. That's my older sister, everybody. Thank you.
I think that was a pretty amazing cheerleading moment. To end on, also to show how families, even older and younger sisters, whatever your history, might also support this kind of connection. I'll also say that so much of what we're in courses that we do in A+D, as well as series like these, we're often putting together intergenerational spaces, and when we talked before about higher education needing to change, to me it's not just faculty hanging on to tenure, it's about how we make sure that everyone throughout the life course stays a student, and how we as an institution respond to that desire. Gina, you embody that desire. You are a compass and beacon for helping us stay true to that vision, and I only hope we can continue to respond as an institution to all that we'll bring. Thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for being here.